Hi, I'm Kayla. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about A Feast for Crows. We're going to go over a few different things today. We're going to go over 1, the plot line, plot summary, 2, the characters, their developments, what went on with them, and 3, my overall thoughts. I will have timestamps below, so if you want to skip ahead to any of those parts, you can go ahead and do that. Let's start with the plot summary. Boy, I struggled last time summarizing the plot line of A Storm of Swords because there was so much happening in it. In this book, there's quite a bit less that happens because it only follows a few main characters. There is no Jon Snow, no Tyrion, no Daenerys. It really only follows Cersei, Jaime, Brienne, Sansa, Arya, and then the Iron Islands and what's happening in Dorne. Let's start with Cersei. So Tywin died at the end of the last book, killed at the hands of Tyrion. So after Tywin's death, Cersei becomes Queen Regent and she replaces a bunch of people on her small council. She basically starts getting more and more paranoid, honestly. After all that happened with Tyrion, she gets really paranoid and she just surrounds herself with idiots, but they're like loyal idiots. So she kind of goes for loyalty or people she can trust over people that will do a good job, which is a pretty obvious issue, I would say. When Joffrey died, obviously Marjorie became a widow for a second time, actually. And the Tyrells insist that she marries Tommen, even though Tommen's like a little kid. I think he's like 9 or something. As I said, Cersei is getting more and more mistrustful of everybody around her. So she is very suspicious of the Tyrells. She actually tries to basically frame Marjorie Tyrell for like cheating on Tommen. So basically Cersei gets a member of the Kingsguard to lie and say that he like slept with Marjorie, but also that Marjorie was like sleeping with her brother Loras Tyrell. These like faith militants, I guess, have infiltrated King's Landing. They call themselves the Sparrows, and so Cersei tries to use the faith militants to like put Marjorie on trial, and this basically backfires. Cersei is imprisoned by the Sparrows. Jaime is sent to the Riverlands by Cersei because Riverrun is under siege with Brynden Tully, who is Catelyn's uncle, and they have Edmure Tully, Catelyn's brother, as a hostage. The siege ends, Brynden escapes. We're not really sure, I guess, what's gonna happen with that. And if you'll recall, at the end of the last book, Jaime gave Brienne the sword that was forged for him and told her to promise him to still go find Sansa and Arya if he could. So he gives her the sword, Oathkeeper is what she names it, and she goes to keep her oath to Catelyn and go find Sansa and Arya. She is going like all around the realm trying to find them. She's like in the Riverlands. She has Podrick Payne, who was Tyrion's squire but is now her squire, I guess, even though neither of them were knights, but whatever. So she has Podrick Payne with her, her loyal companion, and they're going everywhere trying to find Sansa mostly, but if they can find Arya, that's cool too. She actually happens upon this like abandoned inn with all these like kids living in it. Gendry Baratheon, Robert Baratheon's bastard, is actually one of the kids. He's like 16, but he's one of the kids living there. So they stop at this inn, and then the Brotherhood without banners come upon them. This part, reading it, I was on the edge of my seat. So Brienne has this big fight. First she kills Rorge, who's wearing the Hound's helm, so she thinks it's the Hound, but it's actually Rorge. And then Biter, another member of the Brotherhood without banners, like comes up and like starts attacking her right after she kills Rorge. And
oh my gosh, this part!
He literally starts eating her face. She's still alive, mind you. And he starts taking bites. Oh my God. I like don't even know if I can talk about it. Okay, it was just, he starts taking bites out of her cheek. So she's like captured by them, and they bring her to their like lair. I don't really know how to explain it, but they bring her to like their lair, and there waiting her is Lady Stoneheart, who is Catelyn's resurrected self, but obviously it's not really fully Catelyn anymore. She's like zombie Catelyn. She wants to basically kill anything that has to do with the Lannisters, anyone who has to do with the Lannisters. And so they see Brienne's sword Oathkeeper and how there's a lion on the hilt, I think it's called, right? Hilt of the sword. And so they're like, oh wow, yeah, you're working with the Lannisters. Basically, Lady Stoneheart, zombie Catelyn, tells Brienne that if she kills Jaime, they won't be hanged. She'll be allowed to live if she agrees to kill Jaime. It looks like she's probably just about to be hanged, so we'll see. So that's where things end with Brienne. Every Brienne chapter in this book was so suspenseful. Oh, and then the other thing that's happening is like the Iron Islands. So basically Asha, who is Theon's older sister, Theon is presumed dead and his brothers are dead, so Asha's the only daughter left of Balon Greyjoy. Balon Greyjoy died, so Asha wants to be queen. Balon had brothers, and some of his brothers were Euron, who's like supposed to be kind of evil. They call him Euron Crowseye. And then he also has a brother Aaron, who is like a priest on the Iron Islands, and then a brother Victarion, who everybody seems to think is like the right choice to follow him up. They have what's called a king's moot, which is basically like they choose their next king. It's sort of like an election, I guess. And Euron is chosen. I mean, a little bit on the basis of maybe some false promises. He says he heard across the Narrow Sea about some dragons. He's gonna like bring them dragons. But anyway, so Euron's king now, and Victarion is sent by Euron to go find Daenerys because Euron, I guess, wants to like marry her or whatever to make like a superpower couple. But Victarion decides that when he does find Daenerys, he's going to marry her himself. So that's that. And then there's also what's happening in Dorne. I liked the Dorne plot. I like the Dorne plot way more than the Iron Islands plot. I mean, yeah, I just do. I don't know. Oberyn Martell died representing Tyrion in his trial by combat against the Mountain. The Mountain killed some of Oberyn Martell's family during Robert's Rebellion, so he really wanted to like avenge them, but ended up dying, and the Mountain ended up dying as well. So people in Dorne are really mad that Oberyn is dead. Oberyn was like super beloved, but Prince Doran is confronted by Oberyn Martell's bastard daughters. They're called the Sand Snakes, who want revenge. They want to like go get revenge on Oberyn Martell. And Doran is like, I don't think that's a good idea. We've got this weird tentative alliance with the Lannisters. We're trying to do some stuff, okay? Like
Politics.
he imprisons the Sand Snakes basically so they don't do anything like rash or really crazy. However, Arianne, who is Prince Doran's daughter, Oberyn's sister, attempts to crown Myrcella Queen of Westeros. So if you recall, Myrcella was sent off to Dorne to marry the youngest son of the prince, Trystane. Of course, they're just betrothed because she's still a child. But anyway, Arianne, Doran's daughter, attempts to crown Myrcella Queen of Westeros, Queen of the Realm. So she like tries to like escape somewhere with her. I don't really know what her deal is, but she's captured like by her father's men, and now Arianne is like imprisoned. And when she goes to talk to her father, Prince Doran reveals that her other brother Quentyn has gone east to form like an alliance with Daenerys. That's where things end in Dorne. We don't know what's going to happen next. I'm very interested to see what happens in the next book. If Quentyn has actually already interacted with Daenerys, that would be kind of cool. We'll see. So let's move on to Sansa, because I think it was not a super exciting plot line, but it showed a lot of like character growth and development in this book, which was kind of cool. So Sansa has been in the Vale posing as Littlefinger's bastard daughter Elaine. At the end of the last book, Liza was pushed out the moon door by Littlefinger, but they blamed it on the singer. Now Littlefinger is protector of the Vale. He did all of this crazy political maneuvering with like the Lords of the Vale, and Sansa basically bore witness to this. So she's having like a huge lesson in political maneuvering. And Littlefinger plans to betroth Sansa to Harold Harding, who is the person who will rule the Vale when Robert Arryn dies. He has planned to betroth Sansa to this guy, then reveal that it's actually Sansa, not Elaine, and take back the North in her name with the forces of the Vale. That's pretty cool. Oh, and Arya. Arya has really cool chapters in this book. So at the end of the last book, Arya got on a ship to go to Braavos. I love when she arrives in Braavos. I think it's so cool. She like sees the Titan. So she goes to the House of Black and White, the faceless men, and is taught to become no one, basically. So she's taken on as like an apprentice, I guess, and taught to become no one. So she's meant to like strip away her identity, all of her belongings, except Needle, which she hides. So she poses as a girl named Cat and sells like clams and cockles and stuff like that in the canals, or along the canals, not in the, maybe. No, along the canals. There's actually a fun moment where she runs into Samwell Tarly when they stop in Braavos. She finds the singer Darian, who traveled with Samwell Tarly. Darian becomes a deserter of the Night's Watch. He leaves the Night's Watch. Arya discovers this and kills him. But because he wasn't someone that she was supposed to kill, she is punished at the House of Black and White by having to drink this potion that makes her blind. Since we just mentioned Samwell, let's go over his plot really quickly. Because Jon became Lord Commander, Jon actually sends Samwell Tarly to go to Old Town to become a maester at the Citadel, as well as just find out as much as he can about the others so that they can fight them. So it's Samwell, Gilly, her son, and Maester Aemon. Oh, and the singer Darian is with them too. He's also a member of the Night's Watch. And they're all going to Old Town, but they take a ship to Braavos first, and then they catch a ship from Braavos to Old Town. When they get to Braavos, they send Darian out for supplies because they have to stay with Maester Aemon because he's really sick. Darian never comes back. He becomes a deserter. And Samwell actually goes out and tries to find him and runs into Arya, which is fun. And that's how Arya discovers that he's a deserter of the Night's Watch. She overhears their conversation, and that's when she goes to kill Darian. Samwell is like, okay, wow, he's spent all of our money. Spent it all on prostitutes, and I don't even know what else. Fancy clothes. He spent it all. This part was really frustrating to read. I love it though, because Samwell has this moment where he's just like, no, I'm too mad to be afraid right now, and he punches Darian. They do end up booking passage to go to Old Town. Unfortunately, Maester Aemon dies on the way to Old Town, which is not surprising given his age. And then Sam and Gilly hook up on the boat, which is great. In the end, Samwell does get to the Citadel. He arrives at the Citadel. Okay, so let's move on to characters. Yes, perhaps the most fun part to talk about. Let's start with Cersei. I love reading Cersei chapters. She is so horrible. Her inner dialogue is it's funny, but it's horrible. But I still understand why she is the way she is. And so I think that that's a really interesting way that she's been written. So she's horrible, but you're I kind of understand why. It doesn't make it okay, but I understand why. Jaime. Jaime is such a fun character to read. He's been such a fun character to see his development. Last book, his development was just so interesting. Losing his hand really, I think, changed him as a person. I think that he has a different view of things now that he's had to kind of overcome this type of difficulty. I think that his view on the world is very different, as well as traveling with Brienne. I think that she had a huge impact on who he is and how he thinks. And so we saw that at the end of the last book when he gave her the sword and was like, you know, you need to go find Sansa and Arya. And we see it again in this book. There's actually a really funny moment, pages like 408 to 409 in my copy. It's funny because in the last book, he was always calling Brienne wench, and she was like,
My name's Brienne.
and then in this book, he's talking to someone about Brienne and they call her wench. And he's like,
You mean Brienne?
And I love that moment. Clearly she has made a lasting impact on him in the way that he views not only Brienne, but people in general. And then a huge portion of development as well is that when he goes to deal with the siege in the Riverlands at River Run, he had made a promise to Catelyn to never again take up arms against a Tully or a Stark, and he tries the best he can to actually keep that promise by coming to like a peaceful agreement or coming to some sort of agreement. So the fact that he tried to keep his promise to Catelyn when he really didn't have to, and obviously like she's dead, shows that he's like really grown as a character and is really taking more seriously the idea of honor and the idea of his word. So Brienne really made a huge impact on Jaime, and I think it goes both ways as well. I think that Jaime also made a huge impact on Brienne, who sometimes perhaps had a bit of that blind honor ideal. When Jaime tells her the story of when he slayed King Aerys, the Mad King, I think she kind of realized that sometimes honor it's not so black and white. So yes, he broke his oath, but he also saved so many people by doing that. So it's interesting the ways in which I think they rubbed off on each other. I believe it made them both better people. So love that type of character development and growth. It's really interesting to read. It's so fun to see unfold. Arya had a very uplifting end of the last book. It was very uplifting. She was finally on her own, ready to kind of start something fresh and new. And the end of this book for Arya saw something, I mean, the last we hear of her is that she goes blind. So that's not exactly ideal, but I do think that it's really interesting that a character who starts off with such a strong sense of self is then forced to continuously, not just at the House of Black and White, but she is constantly having to throw away her identity. So I think a lot of characters begin stories like not knowing who they are and discovering themselves. She has almost like the reverse, where she begins this story knowing who she is, knowing what she wants or what she doesn't want, and is forced to kind of constantly have to give that up or pretend to be someone different and shed that identity that she felt so strongly. So I think that that's a really interesting thing that she has to deal with letting that go, and it proves to be really hard for her. Part of that is because she has dreams where she wargs into Nymeria, and obviously that's a very like Stark quality, and so it's really difficult for her to fully shed Arya at the House of Black and White. And I'll be honest, I don't know that she's going to do it, but I hope she doesn't, because I like her as a Stark. But it's a very interesting progression to watch. Sansa also had very notable development in this book for me. I think that while she's in the Eyrie, at the end of the last book and through this book, she watches how Littlefinger manipulates all of the Lords of the Vale, and it's really a huge political lesson for her, where she really gets to see like that type of high level maneuvering. We see a lot of development with her growing up and learning how things operate, whether that be politically or whether that be running a household. So it's very, very interesting. That's basically it for my thoughts on characters. Let's move on to just my overall thoughts on the book as a whole. I will say, after reading A Storm of Swords, that book was so good that I just don't think that I don't think this quite lives up to that as a follow-up, and I think a big portion of that is because it's missing some of the most interesting characters to read, like Daenerys. I also miss the parts where they're up at the wall. I do like Jon Snow's chapters, so I think like not having those characters, it does take a little something away from the story. However, A Storm of Swords had a lot going on, and the good thing about this was that while those characters were gone, it allowed us to focus on the plot lines that were there. It allowed us to focus on Jaime, Brienne, Cersei, Arya, Sansa, Samwell. I will say, and this isn't me trying to like say it's a bad plot line, but I didn't love the parts about the Iron Islands. I wasn't that interested in it, if I'm being frank. I wasn't that interested in it. I could do without it. I'm hoping that that plot line like pays off later and has something to do with Victarion eventually like meets with Daenerys or something happens. I did love seeing like all of the stuff in Dorne. That's actually pretty interesting. I would say it's just not as good as its predecessors. But what it lacks in like the extra characters, it makes up for by just zooming in on the plot it does have. So what I would give like books 1 through 3, 10 out of 10, five stars each. And this would be a little bit more of like an 8 or 9 out of 10 for me. Like I'd probably give it 4 stars, honestly. It was very scary. It seemed, I don't know why, it seemed like perhaps the scariest one yet. Every single chapter that Brienne had was like nail-biting, edge of your seat, so scary. So this book felt really scary. I don't know why that was, but it felt really scary to me. I would still recommend it, and I still think it's a good part of the series, but the missing characters are exactly that. They're missing, and they do add a nice balance to where the story is, and with them gone, that balance is thrown off a little bit. It's still very much a necessary part of the series. In fact, it's setting up a lot of things I believe will be really important, so that's kind of cool. Something that I liked in this book, which we got a couple times, was characters interacting unexpectedly. So when Samwell runs into Arya in Bravos, but he doesn't know it's Arya, but we know it's Arya. I really like that part. And it happens with Brienne as well. When Brienne gets to the inn with all the children and she runs into Gendry. And at first, I mean, we learn it's Gendry after just a page or two, but at first she doesn't know it's Gendry, but like obviously as the audience we do. So I liked those little moments that like ties the story together so nicely, and it makes it seem very intentional. I think that sometimes it could be seen as meandering, but details like that show that no, we've got some things that are tied together and we're thinking of them. I'm really excited to read A Dance with Dragons. As I said, this was lacking a little bit of the sparkle of the previous 3 books, but it was still a good book and I would still recommend it. I believe that's basically all I have to say. Let me know if you have any of your own thoughts down below in the comments. I always love discussing A Song of Ice and Fire. Love it. Would be very interested in discussing this because it felt so different than the other books. I will see you later. I'll see you when I'm done with A Dance with Dragons, is the reality.